Here.
Dr. DePaul.
Here.
Ms. Flanagan. Ms. Maddox.
Here.
Mr. Milner.
Here.
Dr. Stanbaugh.
Here.
And Mr. Zane.
Here.
You have been given earlier the agenda for this morning's meeting. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for today?
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Dr. Cox is going to give us a few little budget updates this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I did want to pull up the presentation just as a reminder. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation. I just want to provide some highlights and some updated information. I did add an additional slide to this. Obviously, our vision and mission, we always bring up when we go through this process. A reminder of our budgetary priorities as we entered this budgetary process this year that we kept in the forefront throughout the process. We also have gone through and we received budgetary requests from department heads, from administrators, obviously from advisory groups and the school board. We did review all the requests that kind of came to the top, and those were a part of our process, and we received a lot of feedback throughout the process. The list that you see here did not all make the cut, as you know. These were the items that came to the forefront, and then from there we prioritized, and I did some prioritizing with all of my advisory groups as well as the school board. I know you all participated in a prioritizing activity using the iPads. And what this came up to was this short list of priorities that we deem to be absolutely critical for us moving forward. The additional technology position that's included in this budget is important because we have to meet the standards of quality, and that's based on our number of students. And we have a formula that we have to follow for technology positions, so that's something that we have to fill because of our student enrollment. The curriculum specialists that you've heard me talk so much about, we need them all on the same schedule. We have done a lot of great work with our curriculum, and it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of time-consuming work. And what's so important about that is making sure that all classrooms and all of our schools have the same level of rigor and relevance through the curriculum. And we need them all on the same schedule so that we can keep that work moving forward. We also have the salary adjustment for steps 14 through 27. If you all remember, we did look at a 3-year plan with the salary study, and we started out with an across-the-board 1%, but as we talked, as the board shared and then we discussed, we really need to address the top half of the scale now, and then we can handle other aspects of the salary study over the next couple of years. And that's important to note because you can't do it all at one time. I know that you've heard a lot about step increases and those kinds of things that are in our plan, but you can't do it all in 1 year due to the significant cost. We also have the adjustment for special ed paraprofessionals. That's a 5% increase. We believe we need to do another 5% after this year because we believe they're at least 10% below what they should be paid based on our review. And it's important to note that didn't even come up in the math study. That came up as we were reviewing the results of the VAST study, and we came across this piece ourselves, and we feel like it needs to be addressed, and I know you've received feedback on that as well. We also need a math specialist or coordinator. If we were fortunate enough to get this position, we can have a curriculum coordinator focused on K-12 mathematics. We currently don't have someone in that position, and mathematics continues to be our area that we struggle with. What our businesses are telling us in the community, one of the first questions they ask when someone interviews for a job is they give them a fraction to add 1/3 plus 1/4 is an example. Of course, every time I share that, they have to change their question, but that's where students struggle. Number sense, decimals, fractions, measurement. We need to help our teachers with mathematics instruction. That's vital, especially when you're looking at the available jobs in our community. The restoration of ed and rec funds are included because, we had to cut that in order to balance the budget last year, and that created a significant burden for our schools with paper and supplies, as well as the capital outlay, and the board felt strongly about those two areas, so those are both restored in this budget recommendation. We also are wanting to adjust other salaries that came up as well below market in the salary study. The majority of this is going to be your bus mechanics and your technology positions. We knew technology was an issue because we continue to lose technology folks who work with us for a few years, and they can go out in the private sector and make much more money. We train them up and then they leave us, so we want to make sure we address that. And then the bus mechanics came up as an area that wasn't on our radar screen, but that's a part of why we invested in the salary study, because we need to address those inequities. There are other inequities in salaries that we plan on addressing over the next few years, as we shared at a previous board meeting. And then, of course, we want to increase the pay for substitute bus drivers. We're not showing the cost there because really it's a change in their daily rate, and that's really a decrease in our savings rather than an increased cost. So indirectly, there could, it will impact us, but we actually are going to, their rate is less than the daily rate of a bus driver, so we feel that we can handle that within the existing budget. And the reason this is so important is because we pull from our substitute bus drivers to hire as full-time bus drivers, so that's why that's so vital for us. I won't go through all of these again, but I did talk about, at the Board of Supervisors meeting, we typically get feedback on our savings from year to year. We have savings on purpose. We have savings by design because we need to address capital improvement projects. And we cannot predict with certainty from year to year where that savings will be. The E-rate reimbursements that we receive for technology, Medicaid, the amounts that we get, the capital improvement projects that come in under budget, leads to savings. All of the staff members that we hire as substitutes, because we do not have a certified teacher, that leads to savings. So over the course of the year, we have savings, and then on top of that, we delay purchases throughout the year so that we can ensure that if something were to happen, if something major happened in one of our buildings or a safety concern that we had to address, we want to have the funding to address that without going to the county and saying, I'm sorry, we've expended our funds, can you give us $2 million? So we purposely do that throughout the year, and that is our capital improvement program, folks. I mean, you know that. We've talked about that. If I didn't have any savings, then we would have roof replacements. We wouldn't have lighting and ceiling upgrades, and all of those great things that we've done over the years have come from that savings. And I know you all know that, but I want to make it clear to everyone that says you have savings, and that's why we have the savings. And it's not a guarantee. You can't use that savings for salaries, because salaries are yearly costs. They're recurring costs. They're not one-time costs. The other thing that I'll just point out to you, you see all those items listed there. I want to also address the ask, if you will, the number we're asking for from the county. Obviously, $660,000 approximately in additional funding. We're basing our enrollment, our budget on a 7,000 student number, which is a conservative estimate. I've told you before, we've received slightly higher estimates. The state gives us an estimate slightly higher than that. We've also received estimates lower than that, but we feel 7,000 is a good number to use for budgeting purposes. Also want to remind everybody that we talked about Title I and some of those changes, and I've shared that with the board. We've had to move some positions to local to make sure that we're in compliance with Title I guidelines. The fortunate thing is we have been able to offer, to add some positions using Title I funds to our elementary schools. We're hiring instructional coaches, 9 of them, actually, on one for each elementary school with the exception of John Redd and Collinsville Primary. They're going to share a position. And Title I can fully fund that for us because because that's an additional position to support those Title I schools, and we've been told that we can use that funding, but I want to make it clear that's coming out of Title I funds. That's not coming out of local. We're not adding 9 positions, because sometimes people think that we're adding 9 positions to local rather than using that funding for something else. We're using Title I funds specifically for that. And that's an exciting initiative that now our elementary schools are going to have instructional support in the school, which is powerful because those are our Title I schools, and they really need that additional support. And you have to really pay attention to supplanting and supplementing when you're dealing with federal grants. And that's why we can only offer this at our elementary schools, not the middle or the high school. Because if you offer them at the middle and high school, then that's supplanting, and you can't use Title I funds for that purpose. So that's important to share. Also a reminder, we are adjusting the administrative salary scale to have a minimum, midpoint, and a max, and that's included in your packet, and really that's to provide more flexibility with dealing with equity issues throughout the process. And I've shared examples with you that sometimes we hire a teacher to go 12 months and they make less money as an assistant principal than if they stay a teacher and continue to coach, and that's certainly not equitable. That's one example. There are other examples where a principal goes from director and they don't get a raise. Typically, when you promote somebody, you want them to get a 5% raise is usually the standard, so you need some flexibility in that scale, and that proposed scale is in your budget recommendation there. Also, I want to remind everybody that as I've already mentioned, there are other adjustments to salaries that we need to do over the next few years. This year, we're addressing the top half of the scale because the VAST study said we have an issue with retention. We're looking good at the beginning of the scale for recruiting, but we need to work on retention. And as I've shared with you before, we've had teachers who worked with us for 10 to 15 years, and they go to another school division because they can make more money. And that's problematic. So with this proposal, our salaries all the way through for teachers will be above market. If we get that funded, we can address that, and we'll be above market, which is where we want to be. The plan for the 1.5% increase that you heard about, we anticipate the governor will sign that. He has not yet, but we anticipate that will be the case. I've asked that we delay that and address that as a separate item, as an additional appropriation. I do feel that we need to utilize that funding, and we need to notify the state. I believe the date is June. We have to verify that we plan to use that funding. I recommend that we do that, but I recommend we delay that implementation until as late as January 2016, which gives us a flexible start date and will allow us to apply it to more than just the SOQ positions. Because if you remember, we talked about SOQ positions don't include everybody, because we fund above the standards of quality. And as we discussed, the board is not in favor of doing raises for some and not all. But the other point I want to emphasize to you is the wording in that particular adjustment talks about it being a minimum of an average increase of 1.5%. So that's a little bit different than the wording we've had in the past. So it's more of an average across the board. So we need a little bit more time to talk about what that would look like for us in Henry County, and certainly I would need feedback from the board. So that's why we have not included that in this budget proposal. I recommend we deal with that later, like we did a year ago. We did that 2% adjustment in January. I know this is difficult to see, but I did share this with the board after the last school board meeting. You do remember that there were some numbers that were shared at that meeting that caused some confusion. And I want to make sure that everyone's clear on the additional funding that we're receiving. The small number in the bottom right-hand corner is roughly $402,000. That's the additional amount that we were told we were going to receive in order to support the 1.5% increase that I've just talked about. We're basing our budget on a 7,000 student enrollment number. So when you use that 7,000, you get roughly a $398,000 increase that's listed there at the bottom. the first number on the bottom there. But when you compare the 2 years and you compare apples to apples, there were some slight adjustments in other line items. And then what you end up with is roughly a $385,000 increase. And that is for that 1.5% average salary adjustment that we're talking about. So I want to make it clear to everybody that that's the number, not the number or numbers that we've heard over the last couple of weeks. And I shared that with the school board the day after that board meeting. I know I shared it with Paul Collins as well to make sure that everyone's clear on what that number is, because we certainly don't want the public to think that we're getting an increase of a large sum of money. I mean, that amount right there is to support the 1.5, and it's not enough to support the whole thing, especially if we implement it in August. So our hope is that we can support a raise for everybody by doing it in January, and then moving forward, we can budget for it. And that way we have more time to work through that process. We love when these nice adjustments happen, but when they happen in February, it makes it challenging to incorporate those into our budget, because we start this process much earlier. There are several reminder dates that are listed here, and of course today, certainly my hope would be that we could discuss the budget and move for approval, because you know we need to present it to the county by April 1st. And then of course, we will see what happens from there. Madam Chair, that's probably spent more time on that than I needed to, but I think it was that I intended to also, but I think it was important to clarify, but I'll be glad to answer any questions from the board this time.
Anyone on the board has questions or comments?
Dr. Hutton, at the Henry County Board of Supervisors meeting earlier this week, Dorothy Carter, representing the Henry County Education Association, made a presentation to the Board of Supervisors encouraging them to support your budget entirely, but also asked them to check with you or Don Lawson about what it would take, what additional funds would be required to fund a step increase. Did anyone from the Board of Supervisors contact you and ask for that number?
No, sir. I have not received any request for that information.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to point out that if you look in the budget book that you received, the salary adjustments are reflected in the teacher's salary scale. And my sense is that teachers haven't really looked at that scale to see, because the range in increases they vary depending on where they are on the scale. So I would encourage you to make sure you look at the adjusted teacher salary scale, because that does reflect the recommendation to bring those steps to market. But you're right, there is no step increase. We are looking at a step increase over the next couple of years. We're going to have to address that. We did an estimate on one step increase for teachers only, and we came up with a number of approximately $800,000. So it's very expensive to do a step increase. However, we know that it's going to be more expensive the longer that we delay step increases. So, but the other thing I would say is, if we do the step increase for the teachers, we need to be ready to do it for the classified staff, and because they have steps as well, and that's going to take that number even higher. So we certainly believe our teachers deserve a step increase. It's just a significant cost that we need to plan for.
Are there other questions or comments? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2016 school budget as presented this morning.
Madam Chairperson, I move that we approve the fiscal year 2016 school budget as presented by Dr. Cotton this morning.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Are there matters from the board this morning which you would like to discuss? There being no matters from the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjournment, please raise your